My name is Just a Fan, and I'm here today with a special edition episode, or installment, or video. I'm here with a special edition video dedicated to my favorite movie reviewers of all time. Now, my favorite movie reviewers have their own show, or series, videos. They have their own videos where they talk about movies, just like I do. You hear me talk about them all the time. It's the guys who do Half in the Bag. If you like movie reviews and you've never seen Half in the Bag before, you have to check it out. They're the funniest, most brilliant, intelligent, smart movie review people I've ever seen in my entire life. Now, granted, I haven't watched or read from every movie reviewer out there, but Half in the Bag and the guys who do that, mainly Mike, Jay, and Rich, they're absolutely fantastic, and they really showed me how to look at movies. They sort of taught me how to look at a movie and break down what is it that makes it good, bad, or has all other kinds of qualities like that too. So I'm definitely dedicating this one to them because in a recent review from them for Jurassic Park 5, or as the public calls it, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, which I also reviewed, by the way. I actually recorded mine before theirs came out, and I decided to reshoot mine. And in between the two things there, I watched theirs, and I realized that they also called it Jurassic Park 5, just like I did. And I feel bad because everyone's going to think that I copied them just because they're my favorite movie reviewers. But really, seriously, we called it Jurassic Park 5 independently. Anyway, in that video of Jurassic Park 5 and Half in the Bag, sort of near the beginning, Jay says something about how the director of Jurassic Park 5 also directed a different movie called The Orphanage, and that he's also never seen it before. And I saw that, and I was like, wait, that was a 3-second comment that had nothing to do with the rest of the review, but for me, it was like, wait, The Orphanage, oh yeah, The Orphanage! I have that movie. That one's sitting in my horror movie box. And I gotta say, I like horror movies. I think they're fun. I think it's entertaining, being scared. In the context of sitting at a TV with friends or at the movie theater with friends, it's just an entertaining time. And also, I love looking at horror movies just like any other movie, like it's a piece of art. I think it's just an artwork style here. And also, I especially like the concept of what do we try to figure out that makes us scared? What is it that scares people or viewers? What do we find creepy, hear, see, or think about that we find creepy? And even more important for the context of movies, what do the movie creators think the viewer finds scary? That kind of stuff is fascinating to me. Now, before I start talking about The Orphanage, I'll just give a quick look at what's in the box here. I will say that I don't own every horror movie ever. In fact, there's plenty of classics that I should. I got most of these when Blockbuster was closing and they were selling their DVDs for pretty cheap. And that doesn't mean they're all good. In fact, some of these are atrociously bad movies that I don't like at all. And there were a few that I got very specifically because I wanted them. You might have noticed at the top of the stack here was the movie Jeepers Creepers 1 and 2. I don't care much about the second one, it's okay. But the first Jeepers Creepers I really like a lot because it's kind of stylistic, it has good acting, it's kind of unique in the way that it doesn't have a lot of stereotypes we see in horror movies these days, so I like that one. Coincidentally, at the very bottom of the stack is I need to talk about this one soon in a video, Wreck. If you've ever heard of Wreck, you might not have, but if you've heard of Quarantine, Quarantine's actually a remake of this Spanish movie Wreck, and they both have their own individual sequels that are completely independent of each other. This one is really fascinating to me, so I like those, and I need to talk about them at some point. But let me pull out The Orphanage here. That's really the idea for this video. That's why it's all dedicated to Half in the Bag, and not just Jay because he mentioned it, but really all those guys, because they really showed me how to look at movies, and I super appreciate it. Now, there's no way I can do a movie justice like they do, or make it as fun or funny, but I'm going to give it my best shot. So this is The Orphanage. It's a 2007 R-rated horror movie for some disturbing content, and it's actually a Spanish movie. Coincidentally, so was that movie Wreck. And it came out in 2007, and I saw it sorta after that, like maybe 2008 or something, and I kind of forgot it existed until Jay mentioned it on Half in the Bag. But since he did, and I have it, I was like, hey, let's give it another shot. Let's watch it again, because I really didn't remember what was it about, how did I feel about it, was it good or bad? And so here we go. We'll do a non-spoiler review first, just like normal, and then I'll let you know when we hop into the spoiler section for those who don't want to spoil the movie, which is a good thing. You want to go into this one not spoiling it, especially because there's lots of good stuff where it gets set up early. A lot of things that you wouldn't even think would be important later, and when they kind of come back, it's very cleverly done. Where it's like, oh great, they actually make sense why the character is doing this or why the characters are doing that, and it makes sense why it would be meaningful to them and for the story. So it's got some good stuff like that, and you really shouldn't spoil this one for yourself before you see it. Anyway, in terms of premise, it's obviously at an orphanage, right? And you'll see a character on the main cover there. Her name is Laura. She's kind of in her 30s now, and actually starts by showing at the very beginning that she used to live at the orphanage. It seems to be an orphanage for kids who have disabilities. They establish at one point that one of them is blind, and there's another girl who has like a brace for her leg to help her walk. I don't know if you have to have a disability to live at the orphanage, but for whatever reason they do, and it's fine. It works out. And so it really takes place though in the present day when she's in her 30s and has her own son named Simon, and she has a husband named Carlos. I think he's not really so important for the movie, but what she wants to do is bring her small family back to the building where the orphanage used to be. It's not really an orphanage anymore. I guess it just closed down or something. But it's really cool because what she wants to do is kind of fix it up and settle in with her small family, but then bring in some orphans. And she even says like 5 or 6 kids would be great. Like, let's just kind of house these kids just like I was housed myself and kind of give back in that way. So I really like that because it's a respectable main character in a horror movie. The type where it's like, there's a group of protagonists or a protagonist who just jumps right into a super scary situation and just is begging for trouble and causing all these issues, like the Ouija board thing or whatever. It's like, let's summon some demonic spirits to have some fun. Clearly, the viewer's going to be in a lot of these cases like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? And in this case, it's like, wow, good for you. Like, go back to this orphanage where you grew up and open it up again for new orphans. Great. So it's at least respectable on that sense, and I like that part about it. It doesn't have a lot of stereotypes, it has a few, but not a lot of stereotypes we see in horror movies these days where it's just another facepalm moment of, well, the character's doing this, so of course they are. So I like that part about it. Probably the best attribute this movie has for itself is the cinematography. I don't know, but I liked it a lot. There's some great shots and some really cool transitions in this movie that are clever at the very least, and they also just are very smooth and seamless feeling. It's not really a spoiler to say that in like the second scene in the movie, you got the mom, the husband, and the son who kind of moved into the orphanage, right? So it's like the first or second night there, and it's actually a really cool setup because you have your orphanage, and kind of near there or right next to it, there's a beach shoreline, and there's actually a lighthouse too, and they establish the lighthouse used to work but doesn't really work anymore. And so in the scenes where it's like the middle of the night and the kid's like, Mom, I can't sleep or whatever, and she comes in to try to calm him down and make him feel safe. And so what she says is, you see that lighthouse there used to be on all the time when I lived here, and the light, it's still on today and it's protecting us. And he's like, wait, like, I don't see any light anymore. And she's like, oh, just look closely, you'll see it. And so what she does when he's kind of focusing through the window at the light is she grabs the clock at the nightstand right next to them, and there's like a metal backing to it. And so she kind of uses the reflection of the metal backing to kind of show some light on the lighthouse there with the reflection of the window. And he's like, oh, I see it. Oh, cool. So it is on or whatever. And it's like that's nice because she's calming him down with a really cool and clever way. And it's like, wow, this is really kind of charming and sweet because we have this legitimate looking family that's very believable. And again, it's not like another stereotypical horror movie thing where the kid's just pure evil and always causing trouble. I mean, not at first, I guess. And then you don't have these parents who are evil or stereotypically mean to their child, and it causes all kinds of issues, and that's where the horror begins. It's like, wow, it's a real thing here. So I have a lot of respect for it for that reason, and that's just one example of the good cinematography. There's lots of good transitions. I think there was one from like was it like a hospital scene? They're like in the hospital or at a police station or something, and it just transitions back to the house. Or maybe it's the other way around, actually. They're at the house and they transition to a police station or hospital. It's like, wow, that was surprisingly good. And I think transitions like that can be almost forcefully trying to shove a style in your face, but in this case, the movie's competently made enough where it actually really works out well. The characters are fine in this movie. I mean, I already established that the mom is kind of a nice mom that you would expect a character to be. Her son Simone is all right. I mean, I hate the characters in movies. We've seen this so many times where they have kids or a kid in the movie and they have no emotion and they're just trying to be super ultra creepy by just staring ahead and saying like, they're coming, or some stupid lame thing that's completely overdone. I mean, granted, if a kid was doing that in real life, it'd be creepy as frick, but in a movie, it's just not scary. And I've seen so many things where they try to make a kid or make a group of kids scary because they that's so easy to do, to have a kid just stand there with no emotion showing. Really dumb, but they don't do that here, so it's awesome in that sense. But yeah, in general, the acting seems great by any character, either major or supporting. And I will say this, though, I have to watch the movie with subtitles because I don't know Spanish, and I think it's a little harder to tell if the acting is a good job or not. I think there probably is some kind of barrier there when you're watching a movie in a different language to tell is the acting good or not. In terms of what I can see, though, what I can tell, it seems fine. Like, when a character's scared, they seem scared. When a character in this movie gets emotional, they seem rather emotional. When a character's trying to hold back another character from doing something crazy, it seems believable and pretty good. So at least, I'll give it some credit for that, for sure. I don't really have any issues where I was like, what? Like, what was that crap? Even one of the creepier characters, sort of near the beginning of the movie, there's someone who comes to the orphanage, sort of near the beginning. Nothing really scary has happened yet, which is actually, again, a decent thing because it's believable what situation they're in. It's got a really great setup and setting. Anyway, when the character comes there, it's kind of like normal to a degree because I say, hey, I'm here for this reason, I have this information, I want to talk to you about this thing, and it seems all fine and normal, but then when the character herself, Laura, is kind of like, wait, this doesn't really make much sense, and the viewer also is like, this doesn't really make sense, yeah, like, what's going on here? And so it sort of ignites a little bit of mystery here, and again, it sets up something kind of earlier where when it comes back later, it's like, oh, that makes a lot of sense now. It's kind of a cool full circle in some senses. Some of the issues do arise from actually not fully flushing out a lot of these like full circle things, though. They set up some things and a lot of them get paid off and it seems really competently made, but then by the end of the movie it's like, wait, so what about that? And it's like, oh, well, that fell flat. It's still worth watching for sure, but there are problems where it's just like, why did this happen? And it happens in a lot of horror movies these days. It's like, what was the point of that other than just the creators wanted us to be scared? It's like, that was scary because it's scary, but who cares if it doesn't add to the story or does it help with the characters or anything? So a little bit of that'll happen here. But there's a nice scary moment near the beginning, so that same person who comes to the orphanage and kind of ignites that little bit of mystery, they actually find her again, and it's like, oh, whoa, that was kind of interesting. And so it's like, it's just cool how it builds up a little bit, but without being too forceful, and it still pretty well serves the plot. When the plot does start getting more intense and more horror story-ish and more horrific, it escalates quickly. I was saying earlier how there's kind of a nice relationship we have with the parents and the son, and it's like when it does start going awry, it's like, wow, that came out of nowhere. So it's kind of odd the way it does escalate because you have a very believable, realistic situation at first, and it turns into this like, whoa thing, like, what? Okay. And it's kind of like that for the rest of the movie, so it might throw some people off if they see it and they react to it like I did, but I was really confused how things turned out the way they did, and especially more in the spoiler section when I can talk freely about the whole story, I have a lot of questions where I'm like, what exactly makes this make sense? Because I really don't think it does, but it's still very competently made. Are there other things to say for non-spoiler section? Last comments to make about non-spoiler stuff. I mean, it's a horror movie, right? So how about visuals? Is it visually creepy, horrific? How does that suspense type of thing work? There are some good suspenseful scenes, and it's actually great because it doesn't rely on jump scares to be scary. There's a couple things where something will pop out a little bit, but it's not relying on that to actually have the drama or the suspense in the story be the suspense and drama, which is great. There's one scene kind of in the later, last quarter of it. It's kind of near a climactic scene, and it's done really well. Again, cinematography. The way they pan across and show something and pan back, it's like, whoa, that's cool, and I like the way they do it. And it doesn't rely on the jump scares at all. It just relies on that point on the suspense and the visual and the characters and what they're trying to do. So great stuff in that sense. There's, I guess, a couple startling moments, and they're fairly well done in terms of if you're gonna jump scare someone or gonna use a jump scare in your horror movie, you have to do it respectably or well or in a way where it's actually, there's a reason why it was done that way for the audience, and not even for the story, but for the audience. Is there a reason why they made the scare like that? There's a couple that are like that works out well. And so it's interesting because I almost forget it's a horror movie for a while when I'm watching it at the beginning, because it's like happy family, like, doing their thing and trying to open up this orphanage again, and it's kind of cool. And then when the scary things do start happening, it's still serving that happy family thing, but then it starts to go downhill and they have those issues and creepy things happening, and so it's cool. It feels natural, I guess I'll say that. So many movies, not even just horror movies, but so many movies feel so artificial and fake and unbelievable and just lame. and this doesn't really have a lot of those negative attributes to it. It's pretty well done, and of course that's just the way I see it, but I really do think it's a pretty well made movie for the most part. When I start asking questions in the spoiler section, you might think, wow, he really hates this movie, but I really do find it pretty fun. I guess I should say that this will be the good time for spoilers now. So if you have not seen The Orphanage, it's available on DVD. I'm sure there's plenty of websites out there. I mean, I don't need to look for it because I have it, but I'm sure Netflix might have it. They have some foreign language stuff, or, Amazon Video or whatever the heck people use. I don't use, most of those things. And thanks for watching the non-spoiler part. And for Jay or anybody else in Half in the Bag, if you ever happen to watch this, thank you for not only watching this video, but also for teaching me once again how to look at movies, how to break down what makes it good, bad, or all kinds of other qualities they have, and kind of how that works together to make a motion picture. I really appreciate what you guys do, and I will never stop watching your stuff, seriously. Anyway, let's start talking spoilers for The Orphanage here freely. Hopefully you've seen the movie and you're not spoiling it for yourself. Here we go. I want to start the non-spoiler section talking about that lady Benina, I don't really know how to pronounce her name, but she's the one who comes to the orphanage sort of near the beginning of the movie, and she's like, I'm a social worker with this information about Simone, and I like the way they do it, where Laura's like, wait, so who exactly are you, and why are you here, and how do you know all this stuff? Like, it's kind of a cool little thing where they could have really overdone it, where she just slammed the door in her face and said, no, I'm not talking to you. They could have like a montage where Benina keeps trying to contact her or something. They keep it simple, and that's actually one other good thing about this movie. It's relatively simple. I mean, think about, so this is a really super tiny spoiler for the new It movie, but remember how there was the TV movie of It, and they remade it recently, and there's like the haunted house in there where the kids go into it, and it's like dark and decrepit, and everything's deteriorating in black, and just like, so evil, and everything has to be so over-the-top evil, and like, just everything has to happen in such a stereotypically scary way, and it's like way overdone. It kind of ruins it. And in this case, it's like you don't have this decrepit, deteriorating building of the orphanage. It's kind of like a basic building. There's like stuff there from a long time ago that the kids owned and stuff like that. It's like you don't have to way overdo things to make it scary. And so in this case, I do like the simplicity for the setting, not only the setting, but also the story, so to speak. Anyway, so I like the part where, Benina comes and she's there and she kind of goes away. And then, like, the next couple scenes, you find out that she's hiding in the shed or something. And it's like, well, that's kind of interesting. Because not only do you get the little mystery of why is she there anyway, then you get the added mystery. It starts getting the viewer engaged with why is she hanging out, creeping in the shed. And I like that shot, too, where, you got Benina in the corner over there holding a shovel. And Laura's walking by, and they kind of pan over, and there's like 2 or 3 seconds where the viewer knows before Laura does that there's someone there kind of creeping in the corner. It's a pretty good shot, and it's not even a jump scare. It's just like a genuinely unsettling thing for a couple seconds where it's like, whoa, that's not what I expected at all. And so that's pretty good stuff, and again, it gets the viewer, I was saying, engaged. It's engaging because you start wondering, why was she there? Why is she still there? And later in the movie, when they're at the hospital, I think, and she's talking to the police officer, and she's like, yeah, we looked up if there's a social worker named Benina or whatever, and there isn't one. And it's another piece of the mystery. It's like, wait, so what the heck? Who is she? Like, what is she doing? It's really cool stuff. And then when you see her, I guess the next time is when she dies because she gets hit by that truck. And it's an okay scene because, yeah, we see her, so it's like, wait, was she real the whole time or whatever? Like, you get another kind of piece of, so this is how this is working, right? So she really was a person, and then later you find out that she actually worked at the orphanage, and she had her own son, Tomas, and he had like a deformed face, which is unfortunate. And so the other kids actually ended up leading him to his death, which is terrible. And then she killed all those kids. It's like, man, like that is a bad situation to have been in. But it comes around full circle, right? Like you see her at the beginning, and then that's they say at that point, like, oh, that's why she was in the shed with the shovel or whatever, so she could dig up the bodies that were in the furnace or boiler or whatever that is. Like it kind of all came around and made sense. So at least that made sense, and that's like the good part about the movie. But then when we start having issues with the movie, it's like, wait, so why did any of this happen then? Because if we kind of explain her whole thing, that's where she was in the past, that's why she did what she did in the past, and now we know that, and now we know why she's doing what she's doing now. What's the point of all these kids messing with Simone or messing with Laura? I mean, they hurt her, and it's like, remember there's that kid who she's in the hallway, it's like during their party or whatever that's at the house, and there's lots of kids, I think, with disabilities there, and their parents are there, and just kind of have like a mini carnival day, which is fun and cool, and a lot of them have masks on, which make it creepier, obviously, for a horror movie. I don't know why exactly you'd have all those masks there anyway. I mean, maybe it makes sense for the carnival thing. But there's that scene where there's the kid down the hall with the mask just staring at her, and she thinks it's Simone. And it's a pretty good, clip of, he's coming closer to her, she's coming closer to him, and she's like, "You're Simone, right?" And there's no answer, and she starts to take off his mask, and they actually give you just a little bit of, like, she actually does start to take it off. You'd think that before her hand even got close, that he would swat it away or do the thing where he pushes her back and closes her hand into the door of the bathroom, which looks like it hurts, by the way. But it's kind of cool because you get that the few seconds of suspense of, is she really going to get the chance to lift off his mask, and then what are we going to see, what's under there, because it's a horror movie, right? So they use that decently well at the very least to kind of add some drama and suspense to it. But then it goes back to my question though: why is it hurting her? Why is it locking her in the bathroom? Why are all these terrible things happening to her and Simone when those kids were the ones who were killed? It makes me think of that movie. Remember the really great movie called The Haunting? And then they made that really crappy remake with like Liam Neeson and Luke Wilson and Catherine Zeta-Jones. That was that movie where like they're in the haunted house and everything's all like, scary everywhere. It's a horrible movie. But there's like the spirits of those kids, and then the whole point is like Eleanor has to be the mother to the kids or something. So it's dumb. And so here, is that the whole point? Like, do these kids need a mother? Because that's kind of where it ends, right? Like, that's the thing that happens. I guess she takes a bunch of pills after she finds her dead son. I'll get to that confusion later. And then she, kills herself with taking pills, and so she kind of wakes up in whatever spiritual land, and all the kids are like, "Oh, it's Laura, and she's back, and she's gonna read to us now, and we're all happy." It's like really bizarre, and if that's what they wanted to do, why were they doing anything that they did before? It doesn't make any sense at all. And so even when they do have this well fleshed out thing with this character Benigna or whatever, why couldn't that make sense elsewhere? Why couldn't they use that good thing right there to make it apply elsewhere? It didn't really apply. I guess that's a good word to use here. This doesn't apply to that. That doesn't apply to that. But they still have them all in the movie. So it's confusing as heck to me. I like a lot of the visuals still, though. I love the visual where it's kind of weird near the end of the movie when Laura's like fixing up the orphanage house and making everything look nice and like cooking food for all the dolls of all the kids. Like it's sort of cool to watch, but it's like, why is she doing all that? She even yells, like, she's at the dinner table, and she, like, yells, like, "What else do you want from me?" And I'm like, what do they want from you in the first place? Like, that was my confusion question. She's asking them, is like, "What else do you want from me?" As if she knows what they want from her, even though the viewer doesn't know that, and I don't know why she knows that either. And again, she starts doing that thing where she's trying to appease them and, like, play. She's like, "Oh, you guys want to play? Let's play," or whatever. But, like, if that's what they wanted, why are they not playing with her before? It's so weird. But again, I do like that visual where they establish at the beginning of the movie there used to be a game where like a girl would, or an orphan, one of the crew, they would stand in a tree, they couldn't face the rest, and they would have to say 1, 2, 3, knock on the wall, and then they could turn around and look at everybody else. And obviously when they're looking, they can't move, right? And so they have to knock again, 1, 2, 3, knock on the wall, and then they can look and everyone gets closer. And I guess the first person to get to her gets to tag her and they win or whatever. So it's really cool how they set that up, and then they do it again later in the movie when she's in the dark house and everything. She moves the furniture out of the way. I love the visual where it shows her doing 1, 2, 3, knock on the wall, and she looks behind her and there's no one there for a couple tries, and then the kids appear and they get closer, and it's just a great visual because it's suspenseful. You don't know what's going to happen. It's kind of dramatic. And then of course when they do finally tap her on the shoulder, and I think that must be meaningful because they tap her on the shoulder, which means she gets to chase them now, right? Like that's the rule of the game or whatever. And so one of the kids goes into the closet that is has a secret door that leads her to her son. So like, are they trying to lead her to Simone's body or whatever? Like, I think, because that's what I gain out of it. At first I was like, oh, that's why they ran to that closet, and that's why they had one of the kids or whatever, that's why they had the kid run to that spot so she could find the closet and find the secret door and find her son. It all could have made sense, only when she got to that part, she realized she had the door handle, so she opens up the door and she goes down there. And so, like, it shows the viewer her finding her kid, and he's, like, alive for one thing, which makes no sense because he's been missing for 9 months. And then she picks him up, and it's all kind of, like, bright again and happy again sort of thing. But then they cut, and then they go back to the same scene, and it's like, oh, she sees a dead body on the floor instead. And it's like, so was this all in her head? Was this all some illusion that the spiritual kids are making her see? Is this all, her what she wants to see? I mean, like, what even is it? One of the things that really could have helped this movie is if they established that Laura really did have some type of disability. Maybe she sees hallucinations or imagines things that aren't really there. That could work out really well. I mean, think about the rest of the movie when she sees like the cave over there with her son Simone. He's like standing there at the cave. Cool visual, kind of creepy, right? And her husband's like, "There's no one there. Like, there's absolutely no one there. Simone is not there." It's just like he's right there. I can see him. They have things like that. They have things like near the end when she sees, Simone alive again and he's not. Like a lot of that could have made more sense, and I'd have to ask fewer questions about why does this make sense and why are they doing that if they established some kind of disability that she had. But did she even have a disability? I mean, she didn't really seem to, and they didn't even address it throughout the whole movie, right? I mean, she just was at the orphanage and these kids had disabilities, sure, but then she didn't at all. Like, I don't know. So it's like dang, like how did this go so well and then kind of go down so far with like so little sense to be made out of it? So that's kind of what I meant earlier in the non-spoiler section. There's a lot of things that get set up and are great and kind of flushed out, and then some things that just get forgotten or completely put to the wayside where they don't get addressed again or don't get addressed properly. Very weird. I guess other scenes I do like in the movie, it's one of those ghost movies or spiritual movies. I don't know which one really, because they don't tell us. But so there's like the crew that it's like experts on that. So she goes to like an auditorium and they're kind of doing a presentation on how to communicate or how to be aware of the existence of ghouls and ghosts and spirits or whatever, and so she enlists their help, which is fine. And this scene really bugged me. Well, no, the scene was great, but like the scene after this bugged me because they go to their house, they're at the orphanage. There's like the main guy, there's the woman who can kind of be the one who can feel and see and hear the spirits of the past or whatever, and there's like the tech guy or whatever. So there's a three and they're in the house. I like the sequence where they set her up and they say, I'm going to count from 10 to 0 in Spanish. Obviously I could do that part I knew. And he's like, after I get to 0, you're going to wake up and you're going to be able to see everything from the past. You're going to know what's going on and this and that. And it's a nice long sequence of her trying to figure things out. And it's cool because they have their technology there. And they have the husband there. And there's the police lady there. And the main character, Laura's there. And it's all great. It's all fine. And there's even that scene where, like, eventually when it's a little slow, I guess, for this whole sequence. But eventually when things start happening, there's even that scene where, like, the machines are, like, showing the voices. And there's, like, bars are doing this. And I don't even know what that stuff means or whatever. But it's like clearly something is happening, right? And they even show for a shot there's a quick scene where the husband like looks, Laura's husband looks at her and he's like, he kind of nods at her like, yeah, this is real. Like I know why we're freaking out. I know why this is important to you. And then like after this whole sequence ends, the very next scene is him being like, you know what, this is a bunch of crap. Like I don't believe these people at all. I think they're making it all up and it was all fake. And it's like, didn't you see any of that yourself? Didn't you even see the machinery doing those things? Yeah, they could be faking it, but you even had that scene where you like look at your wife and you kind of nod to her, like, yeah, this is it, this is real, kind of thing. So it was a really bizarre choice to have those two things right next to each other, or those two things at all, because it didn't match what his character seemed to be feeling before. And also, his character is mostly quiet for the rest of the movie, like he's kind of there, but doesn't really have much involvement. And so the fact that he just leaves her after a while just to deal with it all herself and all that, it's kind of lame and stereotypical. I have seen quite a few. I'm sure most people have too if they like horror movies. Quite a few horror movies where it's like mom's love is going to save everyone or save her kid or whatever. She'll do anything to get her kid back and go through this and make all these sacrifices, which is fine. Like, I'm not saying it's a bad story to have, I guess, but it's so typical that by now it's kind of like that's where you end up going with it. So it's a little lame and a little overused, but at least they did things mostly well. Other than the fact that they don't explain why any of it really happened or how, or I really don't know. So like, did her son actually just end up, he found the secret passage door, which is weird because it didn't have a door handle on it after he was in there, so how did he get in? So, like, did he find the secret passage door and just happen to die after he fell down those stairs? They're kind of broken stairs, And then she just was going crazy trying to find him, and she started seeing all these things. Was that the case? Was she, like, that happened, but then the spirits of the other kids wanted her to find him, and so they're trying to lead her to him? Either way, it's like, all those could have happened, but none of those make full sense, or were fully explained or fully fleshed out, so it's like, it bothers me. But those people who helped her out were fine, like, those supernatural experts. I'm glad they were in the movie, I guess. It kind of gave it some some grounding of like, there's all this stuff going on. Like I'm seeing things, I'm hearing things, I'm getting hurt, I'm feeling things. What's going on? And so it's kind of mysterious, and there's not really much of a way for her, Laura, the character, or anybody else in the family to figure out what's going on. And so it's kind of cool to get a little scene of grounding of like, okay, like we're gonna help you, like we're gonna figure this out, kind of thing. That sort of works in some movies, and it sort of doesn't work in other movies. I think it was okay for this one to have those characters just kind of come in and try to help, but then they just leave, which is weird because I guess the husband's like, no, go away. Kind of weird. Gosh. I feel like I'm rambling a lot of negative things about this movie, but really it kind of comes together. Like it does spread out well and start coming together, and it just falls apart right up here where it should all meet up together again, which just, it warrants a lot of questions, but it really generally is pretty well done. One of the scenes I really like is the one where, again, they did this earlier in the movie where they had Laura and Simone playing the scavenger hunt kind of thing, and so later when he's missing and she's trying to find him, it's like how do I find him? What do I do? Oh yeah, scavenger hunt, right? Like I have this meaningful item. I need to find where this item is meaningful in the house, right? Like what on the house grounds was the meaningful place for this. So it's cool because it kind of comes back to that, and it's like, she got to play by the rules. The kids want to play, or the spirits of the kids or whatever want to play. How does she kind of abide by that to like follow the rules to get her son back? So it's kind of cool. That scene kind of confused me though, because like the one before that, it was where her husband was like, we need to stop this right now. Like we need to get out of here, and you're gonna be on your own for finding Simone. Like I'm done, and we gotta get these paranormal experts out of here. I don't like them or whatever. And so like the next scene was her doing all that on her own. So I figured he already left her. And then the next scene after that was him being like, okay, I'm leaving you now. And it's like, I thought you already did. So it was kind of weird. I think it got a little clumsy at the end there, just because it's like, what is the character trying to do, and what's her husband trying to do? Like I don't really know what's going on exactly. On the topic of that scene where he does kind of send the paranormal experts away, I did like what they were saying to her. Like, they're about to drive away, and she kind of Laura comes up to the car, and they're like, the woman of the crew is like, you have to, do the opposite of this. So, like, when you see to believe, you have to do the opposite. If you believe it, you'll see it. And it's kind of a cool little thing. It's like, oh, okay, I get it. And it's simple enough, but deep enough to be like, wait, maybe I need to change my thinking about this. It's kind of cool. But I think it sounded more deep and cool than it really was for the actual story, because she started believing things, but like, and she saw things, but just kind of like, okay, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I'm just not giving it enough credit, and actually it was better than I'm imagining it was. I do like what she said, though. Like, it's a cool concept to think of. You see it and you believe it, sure, but do you believe it so you will see it? That's kind of cool. And one thing I hate about this movie, just before I kind of end here, one thing I really hate is how it makes me feel about kids and how they treat each other. Just because, they established that Benigna had the son Tomas, who had a deformed face or head, and, he wore a mask on his head so people couldn't see him, and she kind of hid him away, which for one thing is sad. It's that kind of thing has happened, which is even sadder, knowing it's not just a movie thing. But then just knowing how, like, kids will... The other kids at the orphanage were like, let's bring him to a cave and take off his mask and tell him he can't come out unless he wants to, like, show us what he looks like. It's like, that's horrible. And I hate the concept of, like, like in the real world, people often say, here's an example, that, like, racism isn't a thing that you're born with. It's a thing that people are taught, see through growing up. And so, like, when did the heck are kids, like, taught to be such crappy little bullies to each other? Like, is that the same type of thing? I just hate the idea of thinking that, like, oh yeah, it's perfectly natural for a bunch of kids to see someone with a disability, especially when a lot of them or all of them have disabilities themselves, and to just treat them so horribly. That makes me feel sick to think about kids are just growing up like that, like that's how it goes. But I don't know, whatever. It's hopefully more of a cinematic thing in this sense rather than a realistic thing, even though that does technically happen. Anyway, bugs the heck out of me. Is there much else to say? The Orphanage? I don't know if I have much else got to say about it. I kind of went through some of the things I couldn't talk about earlier with non-spoilers. I think that'll be fine for now. Again, feel free to check it out if you haven't, although if you've watched this far, you darn well better have checked out the movie. Thanks for watching, and if you do want me to address something further, or you want me to address something that I didn't address at all, or if you think I'm totally wrong or totally right about something, feel free to let me know. You can always make some comments, you can always send some messages, you can always email contactjustafan@gmail.com. I see that email multiple times a day, so I'll always catch anything you want to say about it. And let me know. Has anybody else seen The Orphanage? Did anybody else forget about it until, Jay said it on Half in the Bag like I did? I want to hear what people say about it, because I think it's a pretty good movie for the most part, even though there's a lot of things about it that just really kind of fall apart. But yeah, that's the Orphanage right there. I do definitely want to talk about this movie here soon. I'm going to. It'll be like my next horror movie thing, Wreck, because not only do I get to talk about Wreck, I get to talk about the American version, which is kind of the same, but then I get to talk about the American version sequel, which is totally different than the Wreck sequel, and there's a sequel to that sequel, and there's another sequel to that sequel, and it's going to be a blast. And I think it's pretty interesting stuff when you get into Wreck. So watch Quarantine or Wreck, whichever one you want to watch, and I'll be back for that one. And then we'll do more drawing from a hat, too. I got 3 more or 4 more? 4 more? Gosh, 4 more. 4 more movies to draw from a hat to talk about. So there's that going on, too. There's all kinds of things going on. So thanks very much for being here for this. Thanks for being here for anything else. And thank you, Half in the Bag.